From 2009 to August 2024, under Sheikh Hasina, journalists in Bangladesh learned that a headline could be treated as a crime. Stories about corruption, disappearances, or protests were not just edited, they were measured against the Digital Security Act and its successor, the Cybersecurity Act. A wrong word could mean a case, a raid, a cell, and years lost to court dates. Newsrooms adapted. They censored themselves before the state had to. Then the Monsoon Revolution came. Hasina fled, and the interim government under Muhammad Yunus took over. Laws began to shift. Posters promised a new Bangladesh. This episode asks one hard question: what remains of journalism after fear becomes habit? Bal made the cost of truth unaffordable to media in the country. In March 2023, a reporter named Shamsuzzaman Shams wrote a story about the rising price of food. He quoted a day laborer who said, "We need the freedom of fish and meat." At 4 a.m., the state struck. 15 plainclothes officers from the CID picked Shams up from his home. His crime? The government claimed the story was false because it tarnished the image of the nation. Under Hasina, poverty was no longer a social issue, it was a state secret. This was the Digital Security Act in action. It wasn't about security, it was about the 1,436 cases used to remind every reporter that their next headline could be their last. The law turned every newsroom into a space where journalists learned to whisper before they learned to write. The 2018 Digital Security Act came into being and turned vague offenses like hurting religious sentiment or tarnishing the image of the state into tools that could be turned on any story, any Facebook post, any caption. In 5 years, it targeted at least 4,520 people with charges by the state. They found at least 451 journalists sued under the law and another 97 journalists arrested. In other words, fear was not theoretical. The digital dragnet was wide. In that same research, hundreds of cases were tied to social media posts because that is where ordinary people and young reporters tried to speak when TV studios fell silent. In 2023, facing criticism, her government replaced the DSA with the Cybersecurity Act. The new law kept most of the old language and many of the same enforcement powers. Officials called it reform. Journalists saw the same threat with a different name. Under this legal ceiling, media owners learned how to survive. But the real silence was enforced by the Payroll. Bangladesh has dozens of TV channels, but look at the logos behind the anchors. Channel 24 sits inside the Hamim Group. Independent TV belongs to Beximco. These conglomerates have billions in bank loans and government contracts. Critical coverage of Hasina didn't just risk a libel suit, it risked the owner's entire business empire. The newsroom became a trade-off. You protected the owner's loans to keep your job. This was the silent death of the Fourth Estate, journalism as a byproduct of a banking cartel. After students flooded the streets in July 2024, the old media map cracked. Some television channels framed the protests as chaos. They echoed government talking points, focused on vandalism, and repeated official death tolls that the streets did not recognize. These were the old guard outlets, tied by ownership and debt to the regime. At the same time, a different ecosystem came alive. On one side, state-aligned talk shows minimized violence. On the other, campus journalists, independent portals, and anonymous live streamers documented the slaughter. Phones captured point-blank shootings, intimidation around hospitals and bodies in morgues. Then the screens themselves went dark. On July 18, 2024, the regime pulled the plug. Bangladesh faced a comprehensive internet outage. Mobile internet was only restored after an 11-day blackout. That blackout did not just slow the news, it was a digital wall built to hide a crime scene. In the dark, the pro-revolution press was born. In February 2025, the UN Human Rights Office assessed the crackdown and estimated that as many as 1,400 people may have been killed while the screens were black. 12 to 13% of those killed were children. Those findings gave names to what Bangladeshis watched on their screens in the few seconds before the signals died. For many young Bangladeshis, trust shifted in those weeks, not toward the loudest anchor, but toward whoever seemed willing to show the truth, even from a rooftop with shaking hands. When Hasina finally fled on August 5th, her media machine did not fall with her. But it was no longer the only voice that counted. Sheikh Hasina didn't just rule the state, she tried to own the truth. For 15 years, the Digital Security Act was the jaw of a trap. But while the major newsrooms were being bought, a few lone wolves held the line. Legal experts like Dr. Shadeen Malik and advocate Manzil Murshid were fighting a war of ink. For a decade, Malik stood in courtrooms calling the 15th Amendment what it was: a constitutional coup that turned the Republic into a family heirloom. He didn't have a party, he just had a spine. Then there were the journalists who were erased. Hundreds of reporters spent years jobless because they wouldn't write the regime's scripts. They weren't just fired, they were blacklisted. While their colleagues were gifted luxury apartments and bank seats, these men and women were driving Ubers and tutoring just to keep their names off the payroll of the Big Five conglomerates. The July generation paid for the truth with their skin. In July 2024, student leader Nahid Islam was abducted, blindfolded, and tortured for 24 hours by the detective branch. They dumped his bruised body under the Purge bridge. He lived the evil of these laws personally. You would think a revolution would bring an immediate end to the laws that enabled this. But the machine Hasina built was deep. It took 3 months for the interim government to even announce a repeal. And it took almost a full year to enact the new ordinance. Why the delay? Because the oligarch newsrooms were still in the room. The big media companies, the shields for the bank-looting conglomerates, pressured the bureaucracy to keep parts of the old laws alive. They wanted to protect their empires from the same transparency the students died for. The most sickening rot was found in the ledgers. In March 2025, the Media Reform Commission, led by veteran Kamal Ahmed, dropped a bombshell. They found that the regime's information machine was a mathematical ghost. It was an extreme fraud. The government claimed 15.1 million newspapers were sold daily in Taka to justify billions in state advertising. The commission found the real number was barely 1 million. That is 14.1 million ghost copies. A mirage built to launder public cash into the pockets of party loyalists. Out of 600 newspapers snagging state ads, only 52 actually hit the streets. The rest were props for ad fraud. The media wasn't just silent, it was a multi-billion Taka heist. The Kamal Ahmed report contained over 100 recommendations to break the cartel. It proposed a one house, one media rule, barring the Big Five from owning multiple outlets. It proposed listing large media houses on the stock exchange to force transparency. It even tied journalists' salaries to government pay scales. A reporter's starting pay would match a first-class government officer. Why? Because if you don't pay for news, someone else will buy it. But as of December 2025, not a single proposal has been implemented. The real change is happening in the pixels, not the press releases. The pro-revolution press, campus journalists, and digital platforms has become the country's political bloodstream. They don't wait for permission, they hit live. And the interim government has set a new, uncomfortable precedent: transparency. For the first time, cabinet meetings are being briefed in detail. The secrecy of the information ministry is being eroded by a government that, at least for now, allows itself to be criticized on its own doorstep. The Fourth Estate is no longer just an institution. It is an endurance test. The future will be written by reporters who decide each day how much fear they will allow to guide their pens. The door is open, but the hallway is still full of ghosts. If the Hasina years taught journalists to fear the state, the interim months have taught them to fear the street. The newsroom is no longer a sanctuary, it is a target. In November 2024, the Press Information Department of the government revoked the accreditations of 167 journalists. This has come to be known as the media purge. Seasoned editors and bureau chiefs were stripped of their credentials without a single formal charge. The message was familiar. If you aren't pro-revolution enough, you cannot work. Then came the fire. On the night of December 18, 2025, a series of coordinated mobs attacked the offices of the country's two leading papers, Prothom Alo and the Daily Star. They didn't just protest, they brought gasoline. For hours, journalists were trapped. As smoke filled the corridors, over 30 staff members were driven to the rooftops to breathe. One reporter from the Daily Star wrote on Facebook, "I am struggling to breathe. No one is coming to help." They called the police. They called 999. The response was silence. The mob called it punishment for being part of the old guard media. The numbers are a staggering indictment of the transition. Transparency International in Article 19 reported that over 1,073 journalists faced assaults, threats, or imprisonment in the year following the uprising. 412 journalists have been implicated in cases, many of them bizarre murder charges filed by plaintiffs who didn't even know the names of the people they were accusing. Caught in the middle are the workers of the media. They are branded traitors by the street for what they didn't say in July, and traitors by the old guard for what they say now. They write with the ghost of the DSA over one shoulder and the shadow of the mob over the other. What remains of journalism after fear becomes habit, not heroism? That is a luxury. What remains is endurance, the daily choice between a paycheck, a principle, and a prison cell. Some are branded traitors by pro-revolution activists for what they did not say during the uprising. Others are branded traitors by old networks for what they say now. Many still write with the ghost of the DSA over their shoulder, regardless of what the statute book says. This is the warning the revolution chose to ignore. When you use the tools of a dictator to build a new Bangladesh, you don't get a democracy, you just get a different set of jailers. Be careful lest the victims become the oppressors they once died to overthrow. This chapter has been a tour of a broken media, from the legal fiefdom created by the 15th Amendment to the 14.1 million ghost newspapers. The media was complicit in the past government, and yet the interim has shown that they were more inclined to use the same powers that Hasina created to tame the media. In fact, they went much further and turned street power against journalists as well. This leaves a fundamental question for the incoming government ahead of the February 12th election. If the media is still owned by the same conglomerates and the street is the new censor, can any vote be truly free? The people are watching to see if the victims of yesterday have become the oppressors of today. But why did the world stay so quiet while the bodies piled up in July? To understand the international silence, we have to look past the internet blackout and across the border. We have to look at how a powerful neighbor used its influence to keep the anti-Hasina sentiment hush-hush. In our final chapter, Between Rights and Wrongs, we cross that border. We look at the information war from New Delhi, the role of global platforms in spreading disinformation, and why the truth about a revolution is the first thing to be buried.